I'm Erin. I'm the Sustainable Food Programs Coordinator at UC Merced. I coordinate a variety of programs around food waste reduction, sustainable foods, like Bobcat Eats Food Waste Awareness and Prevention Program, amongst others like the People's Fridge and the Pop-Up People's Pantry. When we started doing these panel discussions about a year ago when COVID hit, we needed something fun for our interns to do and also something fun for myself to do, as well as people to learn from. So we started these series and we've screened a couple of movies and films like Just Eat It, Growing Solutions, COVID's Hidden Toll, a few other films and documentaries. And it's been great. And so we are so excited today to be talking to folks from the Fight for Water, which is particularly relevant regarding food, regarding the fact that today is World Water Day, and that this fight is Central Valley, and we're in the Central Valley. So to stop my ramble, I will go ahead and introduce now Vicki, who's going to be our moderator. Vicki, how are you? And would you like to introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. My name is Vicki Espinoza, and I'm a PhD candidate at UC Merced. My research is around the Sustainable Groundwater Management Act and how potential agricultural land use changes could have socioeconomic impacts on our communities and our farmers. I've also created Cali Water Ag, which is a YouTube channel. It's in English, Spanish, and Hmong to foster better understanding of science and policy on water and land use in California. It's such a pleasure to be here today. Mr. Del Bosque, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yes, good afternoon. My name is Joe Del Bosque. I'm a farmer on the west side of Fresno County and Merced County. I grew up out here on a farm. My parents were at one time migrant farm workers that used to migrate from Imperial Valley to this area. And my father and mother settled here, worked on a farm where I grew up. And in 1985, I began my farm right here in the same area. So I'm still here today. My farm grows organic melons like cantaloupes and watermelons. We grow organic asparagus, organic sweet corn, and we grow some almonds too.
Well, thank you. Mr. Cavanaugh, would you like to introduce yourself?
Certainly, thank you. And thank you for having this webinar. Yeah, again, my name is Patrick Cavanaugh. I'm a longtime journalist and broadcaster in the state of California, 37 years now. A print journalist for a couple of magazines, Pacific Nut Producer and Vegetables West. We cover the industry really very intently and closely. Broadcasting on many radio stations, been doing that for like 10 years throughout the state of California, following the water, following the fight for water. And I'm just glad to be here to discuss it again.
Thank you so much. And then last but definitely not least, Mr. Juan Oseguera, the filmmaker, director of The Fight for Water, A Farm Worker Struggle. Please introduce yourself.
Yes, hi. Well, thank you for inviting me and for being here, and also for Joe and Patrick. I'm glad that they're here joining us for the discussion. Yes, I'm the filmmaker of the Fight for Water. I grew up in this part of the valley, but when I came here to the United States, I was a little baby. Came out from around 8 years old from Mexico. So my parents started working here also as migrant workers. And so I have that background that kind of, when I was growing up in high school, my dad put me in the fields for 2 years. And so that was something I didn't want to do. And I wanted to pursue something else. So I pursued filmmaking. I love videography. I love movies. And so when I did that, I went to a community college. I did some courses in videography. And then because of that, I went on to film school, which at San Francisco State University. And I did some work there and graduated from there. And after that, I did some other graduate work. And eventually I came to this part of the valley, Fireball. And when the water situation was happening, that's when I started getting involved with it. And it's been a learning experience because it's something new, something different that I had never dealt with before, because it affected the valley. I saw my neighbors going through that. And so I eventually delved into it. I wanted to do my first film And eventually, I wanted to do a narrative film. It eventually turned out to be this documentary instead. So actually more about real life situation.
I see. And now that we're on this trajectory of the inspiration and motivation, I'd like to continue with that. And what inspired or motivated you to create this documentary that really highlights the effects of drought on farm workers and agriculture in California, specifically focusing on Mendota and the regions that were highlighted in the film?
Well, because I live here, so I saw it happening. The very first instance that I saw that that the water situation was happening, from my perspective, was when when it happened in the news that Paul Rodriguez was going to be coming down for a water march that was going to be from Mendota all the way to the San Luis Reservoir. And so I had just gotten my camera to do a new feature, something that I wanted to do. And so I thought, well, maybe I can just grab this camera. It's a great opportunity to go out there, film some stuff, and maybe put it on YouTube for people to kind of experience this throughout. But when I went out there and started filming, I really saw the hardships of the farm workers that were marching, and other community people that were being affected. The food lines, people in food lines, really set the tone for, I think, for the documentary, the hardships that they were facing. And so each time it was more and more that was getting involved with going out there and filming and hearing from them, from their own point of view, how this was affecting them, their families, and everybody else. That I think set the tone for what I wanted to pursue. The only thing the hardest thing that I had filming was actual farmers. I put out a word out there that I needed farmers to kind of tell their story. I mean, I was hearing from farm workers and everybody else, but there was no farm worker, actually farmer, who could relate their story, their perspective, because they were, I guess, pretty apprehensive as to, meet this media person coming in, and how are they going to be portrayed, or how are they going to be viewed. And so, I mean, I understand their concerns in terms of that, but luckily I got Joe and George to talk about it. And my really surprise was that they were Hispanic. I didn't know there were actually Hispanic farmers out here in the valley. And so that really kind of set the tone from their own background, coming from migrant workers, and becoming farmers themselves. That is something that I think inspires a lot of farm working communities, that they can aspire to be something like that. So that was my inspiration.
Wow. Well, thank you for sharing that. Mr. Del Bosque, what inspired you or motivated you to become a part of this project?
Well, when I've been out here farming, or involved in farming, literally all my life. So I saw over the years what water meant to this area in the valley, and also what happens when there isn't water. Because we had droughts before, starting like in the 1990s, but never one quite like the one that hit us in 2009, where we only got a 10% water allocation. That means we only got 10% of what we normally get with our contract. And it hit us, it really blindsided us, really. And when the March for Water came together, it was the California Latino Water Coalition that put it together. And they were mostly elected officials from these small towns like Mendota and Fireball, Orange Cove. They were Latino elected officials, and they needed a farmer to speak with them also. And of course, they were hoping for a Latino farmer, and there weren't very many of us. As Juan mentioned to you, a lot of people didn't even know there were Latino farmers. Yeah. But George and I were here, and so I volunteered. I said, "You just tell me what I can do. If you want me to pass out water bottles, I'll do whatever you want me to do. And so they said, well, we want you to speak at some of our functions, which were like press release, press conferences and so forth. And so I said, you know, I'm not a public speaker. I'm a farmer. I didn't even do well in public speaking in college. So, you know, what do I do? And so they said, just tell them your story. Tell the truth. Tell what's happening on your farm. And so that's what I did. And I soon learned that that the world did not really know what was going on here. And it was something that didn't just affect us farmers. It really affected our farm workers and our little communities out here like Firebaugh and Dota. But when you look at the big picture, it affects everybody because everybody eats. And if you eat, you're involved with agriculture, whether you like it or not. Somebody grows that food for you. And a lot of people didn't understand what it took to grow that food. And so I saw that there was a real need for someone to touch the consumer and tell them, we grow your food, and without water, we can't grow your food. And so that's what inspired me to become an advocate in any way I could, whether it was with Juan or with the Latino Water Coalition or with the media. Did a lot of media and talked to a lot of elected officials. And so that kind of became, it took on a life of its own. And it really made me have a kind of a second life in agriculture. And I'm still doing that today.
Wow, that's truly inspiring on behalf of both of you. Mr. Cavanaugh, what about you? What inspired you or motivated you to become a part of this project?
Well, I was a minor part of it. Basically, I was there to do my job, you know, to cover the industry, both in print and web and radio. So we launched a website called California Ag Today, and that's where we put a lot of this stuff. And a lot of podcasts came out of it, a lot of print articles, many radio reports, and it was just imperative that we cover something so important. It's just a misconception in the state of California that plants use water. I mean, they actually borrow it, if you get right down to it. When a plant takes up water from the roots, it transports that water through the xylem and phloem. It's transported through the tree and out the leaves to the stomata cells in the form of water vapor. And in California, 90% plus of that water that the tree takes up leaves the tree and forms clouds someplace else, and it rains someplace else. So that's what I meant, that plants really don't use water, they borrow it. And so there's a misconception that the farm, you know, the farmers are just, you know, it's so much per almond or so much per tomato. But if someone even watered their rose garden in the backyard of their home or their tomato plant in a pot, they're going to put effectively 4 acre feet on that and during any season. So, you know, the farmers, and I might say, I just want to back up here, Joe, I'm just in awe of farmers, total awe. I love them, and I just don't take them for granted. I understand that, you know, they provide all of our food, nutrition, basic subsistence for us to live on. And these farmers, you know, they need the water of the plant. Like I said, they need a basic amount of water, but there's too much of it. And we can discuss this further. Too much of that water is redirected to a place where it doesn't need the water, the ocean. And it happens on flood years, and it happens on drought years. So that's kind of my opening statement and why I cover the industry, because I need to set the record straight.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I want to go and now talk a little bit more about any of the changes that you noted after the film was released.
After the film was released, after the film was released, in terms of reception of the movie, I mean, it screened in a lot of places, and I was surprised that it's screening in other parts of the world, which I didn't expect. The movie screened like in the Czech Republic, and it's screened in Malaysia, And so I was really surprised that it picked up there. I mean, I wanted to screen the movie a lot of places, hopefully in the United States, but it picked over there, and the reception from over there was kind of unique because they had a different perspective as to they always see the United States as this prosperous country that doesn't have like third world situations, and it looked like this was like a third world situation where you don't see much of that stuff only in those kind of countries. So that was kind of interesting in terms of that. But it's screened in a lot of places here in California. I was picked up by a lot of the irrigations districts, like in Fresno, Merced, also in Yuba County, Yuba City, Calusa was screened over there, I remember. So in a lot of places that were facing kind of water situations for their area, that's where it was screening. That's where this movie was being utilized to kind of create that awareness to their communities of how situations like this happen. Maybe they were intended for good cause, but in terms of the legislature, I guess the Endangered Species Act, but it had unintended consequences later down the line, and we see that. And I think the movie is a reference in terms of how that legislation has consequences, unintended consequences that could probably help out, maybe understand, and maybe hopefully rectify or kind of help out in some situation with that. So in terms of the reception throughout, it's been well received and has helped a lot of out of the communities in terms of the farming and agriculture communities. It's been something helpful, and then hopefully for everybody else. Oh, also another one, another thing is that in San Francisco, people were really unaware. I went to San Francisco State. It's a very liberal kind of a city in terms of a school, and they were really unaware and really kind of that this was happening in their neighboring towns and their neighboring areas in the Central Valley. So, that was something that they were not aware of. And also they were really apprehensive. They were apprehensive about farmers and the agriculture in this area using or getting access to water. And so they were kind of eye-opening at the same time, but also kind of questioning, how much water they're going to getting, and which is understandable that they would do that, because it's always problematic, I think, for some of them understanding the situation. But hopefully this opened up their eyes to that.
Right. It's important to understand, especially for cities, to understand where their food is coming from, where their water is coming from. So I'm glad to hear that this had that reach, and it helped clarify that important message.
Yeah, and another thing I have to mention is that the movie has been screening at universities and colleges, and it's been using, from my understanding, and from the distributor, as a curriculum for educating the students who are majoring in those kind of majors. So hopefully, it's getting out there and it's still getting some screens and education purposes.
Absolutely.
I might like to say, just cut in here if I could, excuse me. What Juan did during that Fight for Water March, he's the only guy out there with a video camera for the most part. He captured the intense emotions of the farmers and the farm workers and all people allied to this incredible industry in the state of California, the state that produces 100% of many crops and the vast majority of others. And we need to preserve that. But what Juan did was document this in a beautiful way, in a way that needed to be documented. And it's a record. It's a recording that will always be there for us to see. Even decades from now, there'll be somebody to see this, what happened in California during that major drought we had. And here we are continuing our water scarcity as we speak.
Exactly.
Sorry about that. No
worries. I'd be happy for it to be conversational. So please jump in and, converse and jump off of each other's ideas. Mr. Del Bosque, would you like to include anything else regarding any changes that you may have seen occur after the film?
I think there was a lot of awareness, a lot more awareness after this, through all of the media coverage and through documentaries like Juan did, and there were other documentaries, people who came out. There was a lot of interest in this drought. We had journalists here from the three major broadcast companies, from CNN, from Yahoo, LA Times. They were here, and not only from this country, but even from around the world. We had journalists here from France, Germany, Sweden, Japan. They were all interested because they knew there was a connection of their country to our agriculture, because we export so much, and so that was kind of my mission, is to get people to understand what California agriculture is, what the reach of California agriculture, what is the nature of what we grow in California. We're not just farms, we produce 50% of the fruits, nuts, and vegetables in the nation right here. I grow melons, and California grows about 75% of the cantaloupes in the US. We grow processing tomatoes. California grows 95% of the processing tomatoes in the country. So if you're in San Francisco and you have pasta with the marinara sauce, it's most likely coming from right here. Or if you're in Los Angeles and you're eating a little, one of those little clementine oranges, it's from here. If you're in New York and you're eating a cantaloupe, it's from here. So we have this huge reach, and it was important for these people to understand and connect back with us, because let's face it, farmers have done a terrible job of letting the world know what we do. We've not been doing that. We're just keeping our nose to the grindstone and working and growing crops and doing what we do, and nobody is connecting with the consumers out there. And so that was much needed, and we're starting to see some results of that. We use social media now, and my company's on social media, and we let people know what we do, how we grow things. In essence, I wanted agriculture to be transparent in a certain way. We're here. Look at us on social media. This is what we do. Forget what you hear, like maybe Juan heard at San Francisco State, which I heard some of that too. They had their preconceived, right? Isn't that right, Juan?
Yeah. He went with me. So, I mean, and I remember there were some arguments or kind of pushback against that. And so, I'm glad that Joe was right there, and he can explain it better than I would ever could explain that. And I think, it was great. Yeah.
Yeah, they thought we were poisoning the world, and we were killing fish, and I was accused of killing killer whales and all this stuff, right? And all I'm trying to do is feed people. Mm-hmm. And what I tell people is, look, when you go to the store and you buy some food, you get it off the shelf. That's the only place it comes from. And you go in there and they click it in the cash register. You're telling a farmer to grow that food for you. Doesn't matter what it is. Whatever you buy, you're telling us to grow it for you. And because a lot of the fruits and vegetables come from California, you're asking a farmer to go out and find some water to grow that for you. You don't know that, but that's what's happening. Mm-hmm. And we need to have this connection with the public. And that's what, I'm thankful to Juan for his film reaching out. I think it's just really important for folks to understand, what it takes to grow these crops, what, some of the challenges that we have, like these droughts, immigration issues, and so forth. So it's just incredibly important. And of course, Patrick was great. He was there every day on the March for Water, and ever since, you know, he was there following the whole scene as it was unfolding of this drought and what it's doing to people and farms and consumers in the end.
Yeah, that's wonderful. I'd like to ask a question related to the misconceptions. Are there any other misconceptions about agriculture or migrant workers that you would like to address for our audience?
Absolutely. You know, people think that they think that we single out undocumented people and pay them less and abuse them. That is, you couldn't get farther from the truth. We treat all of our workers with dignity. We treat them all with the laws of the state and the nation, and we don't separate between whether you have documents or not. We treat them all the same. And in my farm, because we do things like picking and packing melons, which is really pretty specialized, and a lot of people don't realize that a lot of these farm workers are highly specialized. They're highly skilled. And so on our farm, we've trained them to do exactly what we want. We sell our melons to places like Whole Foods, you know, places that they want the best. And so I want my people to do the best. So we train them on how to do that. And at the end of the year, because a lot of these people who pick and pack our melons are seasonal workers, we want them to come back next year. So how do we do that? How do we get them to come back next year? We treat them good. We treat them so that they want to come back. And that's important to us. It's an employee that has learned to do the trade and he learns their company. We want him to be happy at the end of the season and say, hasta el año que viene.
And I might add another misconception that we hear all the time, but before I do that, I'm going to back up and just talk about Joe's social media. If every farmer in the state of California just had a Twitter handle or something, you know, that to outline what they're doing every day, it's simple. It takes seconds, and Joe knows it because Joe is so active on social media. Correct me if I'm wrong, Joe, but you have regular visits from social media people, bloggers, and other people down from the city, from LA, come up to your farm.
No, it's true.
And you get to teach them, you know, they're on your farm, and boy, did they go away with a different frame of mind of farmers, don't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes that's the best thing is come out and see it yourself. I remember I got a reporter to come out from the LA Times, and she sat right here in this office. And the first thing she asked is, "Are you going to tell me the truth?" And I said, "You know, my mom taught me to always tell the truth. So yes." And that started a great relationship with this reporter. And I took her out to the fields and we saw the almonds and we saw the melons and the people working and everything. And she came away with a whole different view of agriculture. And she wrote a great story. It was on water, but I said, you know, you can come and do a story on anything you want. My farm has an open door for you anytime you want. And I've had a lot of relationships with a lot of other journalists and elected officials. Maybe you're not aware of this, but we have had legislators here. We've had congressmen here. I've had 3 governors here. I've had our 2 senators here, and of course President Obama came to my farm also.
And a lot of that's because of Joe's social media, what he's doing out there. He makes himself available. He's extremely transparent, extremely authentic as a farmer. He always tells the truth, and I love it. It's great. One misconception. You go ahead, Joe.
If you're doing everything right, you have nothing to hide.
That's
and that's
right.
the way I am. We bring people out and go ahead, come out and look. You know, I've got nothing to hide.
Yeah, a lot of people from the cities think that the farmers and the farming industry here in the Central Valley is just big corporate farms, you know. And UC Davis economist did a major research project on this, and they found that 85% of the farms in California are family owned, just like Joe's farm. Yeah, and we all are corporations. I'm sitting here and I have my own corporation, but it's basically for tax reasons because it pays for my health care and things like that. It's just easier for me to manage things. But I'm not a corporate person. I'm just an individual journalist, happens to have a corporation behind me. But the vast majority of farmers in the state of California are, all of them are incorporated. They need to be for the same reasons I am, but they're not just big corporate farms. That is a button that people push to try to get points, and see, the farmers in the Central Valley are all corporate farms. We need for those people to go away, just have mom and pops farming our food. The basic fact is that's who's farming our food. Small farmers, medium-sized farmers, all family owned. That's a major misconception.
Thank you for clarifying that. Yeah, I think that sometimes it can become overlooked, the fact that we have a lot of small scale growers or, these family owned farms that are really putting all this food on our tables here in the Valley, the state, the nation, and the world. So thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to add before we move on?
I think that's it. Oh, I would like to add also, if anybody, if all the farmers in the state of California, and if they can't do it, get one of their kids or get an intern to do it, start their social media. If they could all have a Twitter handle and be able to talk about what they're doing on the farm. And if something's really important that has happened, like the 10% water allocation, devastating because it's, this the initial allocation, it could go up. Well, if all the farmers at that moment that has heard that went on Twitter and said, hey, it could be another bad year for our state farmers. And because we're only looking like a 10% allocation on the federal water districts. And they mentioned LA Times. They mentioned the San Francisco SF Gate, the San Francisco paper. And Denver, they can just put the newspapers and television stations. And what happens when they did that? They get notifications. Hey, what's going on up there in the valley? These farmers are experiencing some more hardship. And that notifies them that this is all going on. And, this could be organized very easily. We just help educate the farmers. And this is what we do. When something happens, we can send out a massive email to these, to people in the ag industry to put this on Twitter or Instagram or Facebook. Joe's involved in all of it. So if everybody was half as good as Joe is, it would look different in the state of California. We'd have different relationships between the press and farmers.
If I could say something about the size of farming, because a lot of people, when they think about farming out here, especially on the west side, they think of, big ag and so forth. Every farmer has his optimum size. Okay. For me, optimum size is about 2,000 acres. At that level, I have the economics of scale. If I were smaller, if I were a 200 acre grower, I couldn't afford, say, somebody to take care of my food safety. At my size, I can have a food safety director. Okay, and at a small size, maybe I couldn't afford the equipment that I need, or maybe there's things that are benefits at a certain level, and that's what everybody reaches for. And for some people, it's bigger. For some, it's smaller. A lot depends on the crop that you grow. So, they're big farmers. I have friends down the street. They're a family farm, and they're probably 5 times bigger than me, but they're still a family farm. They just happen to have been farming for 50 years more than I have. So it doesn't matter. They're still farmers just like ourselves, and they're still family owned.
Thank you. Yeah, there's a question in the chat, and it's asking. Oh, it's been answered. Is most of the total acreage in California owned by family farmers like Joe? I'd like to ask, do you know, or do you have an estimate of like how many RRs like in acreage are family farmed owned?
I don't know. I would say the vast majority, and they're up and down the state. Some of them are, half of the almond industry, which is one of the biggest industries in California, Almost half of that's Blue Diamond growers. And Blue Diamond growers, I think the average farm for a Blue Diamond grower is 85 acres. I mean, they're
I've heard
smaller
that.
farmers, okay? There's very big farmers with thousands and 10,000 acres, and even they are family farmers. But there's just that big misconception that we have outside corporate people running the farms in California. Not true.
Mhm. Where do you think this misconception stemmed from?
I think it's chatter, it's uninformed press from back east, maybe. There's a
Okay.
lot of corporate farms in the central part of the state, and maybe they're not even. Maybe that's a misconception too. Maybe Cargill owns a lot of farms, that produce seed. That produce the food for the livestock that most of the Midwest is farming for. But that's just another misconception on top of the water needs for farmers.
Yeah. Well, thanks so much for clarifying those misconceptions. And I'd like to ask, did the 2014-2016 drought emphasize or shift any of these aspects of the issues that need to be addressed in terms of water availability? And if it did, how?
Can you repeat that? I didn't hear the first part.
Did the 2014-2016 drought emphasize or shift any aspects of the issues that need to be addressed in terms of water availability?
Do you want to take that one, Patrick?
Yeah, I can start out. Yeah, well,
Go ahead.
farmers are always aware of the need for water, and I mean, that's their lifeblood for the farm. They can't. If they don't, they have to leave their land idle if they are able to. You can't leave an almond orchard idle, but you can leave row crops idle. And that's another misconception, by the way, because some people say farmers are having to fallow their land because of the drought. Fallow is an intentional thing you do if you want to set aside the land for something else. But idling the land is something you don't want to do necessarily. And but farmers do that. They don't plant the row crops, take the water they were going to use for that, put it on their permanent crops. Okay. So, but farmers are always aware of that. I don't know what shifted in terms of, I think there's been a higher level of appreciation for how much the economy of agriculture, the economy that agriculture produces. I know that the almond industry, being one of the biggest industries in the state, they had the UC Davis the economics department do a complete study on the economics of the almond industry. And they said there was 70,000 people, not farmers, but 70,000 other people involved in the almond industry. How could that be? It's the candy maker in LA that puts the almond in the candy. It's the truckers up and down. It's the farm equipment companies. But they multiplied that out. In fact, if you look at the gross receipts of farming in the state of California, you can multiply that as many as 3 or 4 times to get the real number of how much the economy is built on farming and how important farming is to the economy. But I don't know what's shifted. Joe or Juan, I don't. I guess there was more. I think there was a more aware of the need for more storage. Maybe raising the dams, if not creating more dams, but that seemed to have stalled. I don't know if we're ever going to see it again.
Let me answer this on as far as shifts and adaptations, but I need to go farther back than 2014. I need to go back to 1990, because that's when we've had the first regulation come in that took water away from us. The Central Valley Project Improvement Act, called the CVPIA, basically took a third of our water away from us, starting in 1990. And what did farmers do? At first, we fallowed land. We didn't know what to do. So the next thing, of course, we realized that we would go broke fallowing land. So we started getting more efficient with water, eventually moving things into drip. And then we realized that some crops didn't have a future with us. And so things like cotton were shifted away from cotton toward almonds, because we needed something that would give us more bang for our water buck. And so we shifted to almonds. Almonds is a higher valued crop. It may take a little more water, but you get more for your water with almonds. So we kept shifting, and eventually, you know, we got to be very efficient. But then in 2009, what happened then that was it blindsided us. The biological opinions of 2008 hit us, and we were really cut deep, down to 10%. Now, prior to 2009, we were able to project our water supply based on hydrology, based on storage, based on precipitation. We knew what was coming. When the biological opinion took effect, it changed everything. It was not based on any of those things. It was basically, you shut off the pumps because of the environment. And so we had to learn new things. And one of the things that our water districts learned to do was find alternative sources of water. And they were able to partner with other districts that maybe had more water, and they would sell us some of their excess water. And that got us through 2013, 14, 15, when we got zero water, zero allocation. We were able to get by because our district talked to other districts somewhere in the state, and we were able to get water. It was extremely expensive. We were basically buying somebody else's crop to have their water. And so that required that we could only use that water on very high valued crops like almonds. Or in my case, I shifted from conventional melons to organic melons because they have a higher value. Some of the crops went by the wayside, like cotton. Cotton went from 1.2 million acres in the state down to below 200,000 acres in the state. Basically did a shift with almonds. And so we've had to make a lot of adaptations, but you know, eventually your gas tank runs out. Either if your tank is out and somebody else's tank is out, what do you got, right? And so these are kind of the changes that we've made, and they've been very painful because they've been very costly to do, just to try to stay in business, try to keep our farm going, try to keep our employees employed, and supporting the little local communities that support us also. Little towns like Firebaugh, Mendota, that, you know, we shop at their hardware stores or the tire stores. We couldn't do it without them. So they need to survive too. And these droughts have been very difficult for everyone out here.
Wow, thank you for sharing that. How has the fight for, this fight for water changed during COVID, if at all?
Unfortunately, it took the focus off of water. We were already in a drought last year, and nobody knew it. Nobody said anything about it because everything was about COVID. But we were already going into the drought last year. Last year, our precipitation was below normal. What was good about last year, and thank God for storage, is that we had water and storage from the year before. Yeah. And that's why storage is so critical, because you hold it when you have a wet year to get you through the dry years. Now you can get through maybe 1 or 2 dry years, and then even your storage runs out. So that's why next year could be a very disastrous year, because our storage levels are low. And if we have a low precipitation next year, we are in very deep trouble. And, to have mitigated that, we needed to have built more storage. And there were a couple of projects that, we fought for in this March for Water. We fought to get a couple of surface storage dams built. Many of us that were in this march and fight for water we advocated with the legislature to pass legislation, and we got the water bond passed, Prop 1. It was passed in the legislature, I think, in 2010. And unfortunately, it didn't get on the ballot until 2014 when we were in a drought again. But nothing has been constructed yet with that money, at least not for agriculture. And so we're still here 10 years, 11 years after we passed that legislation, and we don't have any more storage, unfortunately. And so that's what we were fighting for, get maybe 1 or 2 extra dams that would get us through 2 drought years and not just 1.
Yeah, there's a question in the chat about groundwater. So it reads, one of the original purposes of the Central Valley Project was to replenish groundwater used in irrigation. But since they lowered allocations, that cannot happen. Do you think that justification will ever be viable again with the current politics of water the way it is?
Well, you can go back in time, and when groundwater was starting to be depleted was when we didn't have surface water. When we started getting reductions in surface water, farmers, they went to the ground. Maybe they thought it was for 1 year, but maybe it's gone on longer, and they have started lowering the groundwater levels, hoping that we would have more surface water. And of course, we haven't had that extra storage. So that is a disaster that's coming our way. We know it. We know that some areas are going to get hurt worse than others. Areas that don't have surface water, access to surface water, are basically going to go out of business because they will not be able to resort to groundwater. We still had time if we could, develop more storage, but time is going fast, and that's going to be very painful for not only farmers but a lot of these rural farming communities.
Right. Yeah. And there's a lot of talk, especially for groundwater dependent communities and growers. And so one of the questions I have is groundwater overpumping is another issue that was further emphasized in part of the 2014-2016 drought, which led to the passing of the 2014 Sustainable Groundwater Management Act, or SGMA. Are there any concerns you have about SGMA and the current approaches to addressing groundwater overdraft?
Well, I think that, I think SGMA was necessary. I know it's painful, and a lot of farmers would probably throw bricks at me right now for saying this, but I think it was probably the right thing to do. But with that said, what can we do to mitigate those impacts from SGMA? And I served on the California Water Commission for something like 9 years, and I do believe that we should do some more groundwater recharge. That can be done. It's been proven that it's effective, and it's a form of water storage that doesn't require concrete. What it does require is the ability to get excess water from the rivers, storm flows, let's call them storm flows, from the river, and get them out to the areas where we can recharge the groundwater. Now, what's the holdup? It sounds like a great idea, right? But the holdup is there's a lot of red tape to get that water from the river to these areas. And when you try to do that, you miss your opportunity. The water has gone out to the ocean by the time you start, you start doing that. So it's something that has to be facilitated, I believe, because there are times when the rivers run very high where we could take some of that water, divert it into these overdrafted lands somewhere in the valley.
I think we gotta, the California has to look at all options when it comes to the water needs of the state, the complete water portfolio for the state. The CVP, much of that water goes to LA. It gets pumped over the Tehachapi's in LA. If Los Angeles could adopt, it rains in LA quite a bit, even in LA it rains. And most of that water, groundwater, and that water that falls in on LA goes out to the ocean. They have to figure out a way to capture that and reuse it somehow. And I know people scoff at this, desal plants. We have world-class cities on the coasts of this state. They all need to explore really desalinization to help get that water to their population and take less of it from the farmers. Because when they do that, they don't need to take so much from the farmers. I mean, it's a co-equal goals we all have here. We want the urban population and the farming population to both benefit from the water that's available to us. But if we can, San Diego, their people fought badly against a desal plant down there, but they have a desal plant now, and now they're expanding it because the people in San Diego love it that much, and it dropped their water rates. It's part of their water portfolio. So we need to really seriously consider this. It's being done. In Israel, they have 15 desal plants on the coast of the Mediterranean Sea, and they desal that water, and that water goes to the cities, and the wastewater from the cities goes to farmers and the environment. And everybody's got plenty of water in Israel, a desert area. I mean, we got to think like Israel. And there's another question there. I would like to know more about the Endangered Species Act legislation's impact on water.
Yeah, I was about to ask.
I mean, my gosh, that was the big hammer, other than the CVPIA that Joe talked about, when the smelt got declared endangered. And there's a lot of debate on whether it's really that special, but it really made a big difference. It took the drought and made it even worse. And it was known as the Congressional Drought because the Endangered Species Act is federal. And it really made everything so much worse. And over the last 10 years, we have found out that, even though we idled all the land, we stopped pumping the water, farmers and farm communities suffered mightily because of that water allocation problems, water allocation issues that they got 2-0 water allocations 2 years in a row, I believe. But and there was 30-40% unemployment in some of these areas around the Central Valley. What happened? It didn't help the smelt. The numbers actually went down, the populations. So we need to know more about the population of the smelt, the Delta smelt. All of that was for no good. That's how it impacted us, because it didn't do any, if it did some good, Joe, right? If it did some good, we could at least say, hey, we're glad it helped the smelt, right?
Right. They're getting worse.
It's getting worse. The populations are getting worse. That's the big irony. And the people behind this, protecting the smelt, they're not calling a press conference and saying, look, we know you guys really suffered big time. You guys really, your communities were impacted severely over those years. But
so my question, I'm sorry, my question in terms of the, as a filmmaker, I know that I addressed that in the film, a little bit of the Endangered Species Act, but is in anything that has transpired in the last couple of years, that I haven't been filming, has there been kind of legislation kind of been able to kind of change some of that stuff through the because of the Endangered Species Act? Has been some sort of movement to kind of rectify some of that stuff? That part I really don't know. Maybe Joe or Patrick can.
There has been some legislation, and Joe can probably add more to this. There's been more flexibility in using the pumps at the Bill Jones pumping plant. There's more flexibility, not just when 3 smelt are found in that area, they turn off the pumps. Mm-hmm. There's more, they're able to keep the pumps on, turn them on more and longer. What do you have to add to that, Joe?
Well, one of the things that we as farmers believe bears some improvement is in the biological opinions. And the biological opinions that are in place are based on science from early in the century or maybe the 1990s.
Mm.
And they look at the environment one species at a time. I know that the last president, he called for a reconsultation of the biological opinions. There was some conflict with the state of California. The state would not accept that new study, but we think it needs to be done. Whether president does it or another president does it, we need to have a reconsultation. We need to go back with new science. What have we learned in the last 20 years? And let's update our the way we approach the ecosystems and the control of water and water quality. And that's what we think that needs to be done, is updating our science on how we manage our water and how we manage the Delta.
Good job. Really.
Thank you. I see we have about 3 minutes left, and I do want to ask Mr. Oseguera, how do you have any new projects upcoming? Are you going to do an update? Can you give us some insight on future work?
Well, yeah, for the last couple, I guess, years that I've been away from filming any kind of water situations here in the valley, it seems like it keeps recurring. It keeps, it always seems to be something new. And I see a lot of Joe also, like you said before, on social media and out there and talking to the news. I see sometimes the local news, and I see him there that he's talking about issues, not only about water, but more of an activist about the farm workers, their situation, what's going on within the last couple of years, not only being affected by water, but also immigration, which affects agriculture as well. So I think I probably need to go back to it. And I really thought about probably addressing that and moving an update about what has been transpired, because obviously what I see is that there still needs to be awareness going on in terms of, as Joe and Patrick has been doing in their own careers, doing that. So I think I need to explore that. But currently right now, I'm just for the pandemic, I've just been focusing on myself and doing photography, doing all other personal stuff. That making movie was a really kind of tough experience for me. Not just making the movie, but also the marketing. And so that has been kind of the thing. But yes, I something need to kind of go into it probably. We'll see.
That's wonderful. Looking forward to it. And then one last question. How can we elevate awareness of water rights or just water availability and its allocation besides panels like this one and marches?
We all need to just be aware of the allocations and the impact on California. Make sure it gets out on social media. You can't really do anything more than that, or write stories. But see, I write stories and the farmers are the audience. We need to get it out further. So that's what I'm saying. If we all get on Twitter during these allocations, which we did at CalAg today, as Joe did on Westside Farmer, and I know that Juan is very active. And we mentioned these newspapers and other important people that can make a difference. They become aware of it, and they may pick up the phone and maybe call one of us and get more information. That's all I can say.
I agree with Patrick. We farmers, are terrible at getting our message out there. We need to be, first of all, we got to quit talking to ourselves. We got to talk to people who don't know farming, right? Mm-hmm. And we need to make them aware. We need to open up, not be afraid of the media. So many of my friends, I've asked them, would you? I can't take this guy. He's from the media. Could you do it? No, I won't do it. I don't talk to the media. They don't want to. Okay, I'm not afraid. I'll talk to anybody. Right?
I know that.
but most farmers, they don't want to. They just say, no, send them to Joe Del Bosque.
And through radio, I get Joe and I get other people on the air through, and I get mail from school teachers. I hear from different people that are commuting talking about, hey, I heard
Yeah.
it's so nice to hear from the farmer and what they're going through. I mean, we need to outreach as much as we can on the air, on social media, in print, and whatever we can, just keep talking about it.
That's true. We need to be, in agriculture, we need to be more open. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah. Yeah, feel free to reach out. I have a Cali Water Ag YouTube channel, and I'm always putting information on there that is, you know, it clarifies the science and policy behind water and land use in California, and maybe there's potential for collaboration. Shameless pitch there. The link is in the chat if anyone's interested in checking it out. But yeah, I think that we need to really be able to elevate the voices of our growers and be able to understand how we can all work together and figure out how to deal with these water issues together through different perspectives, so that one group isn't being left out and decisions are being made moving forward without those that are impacted by these decisions. So thank you so much. I appreciate all of your time. And thank you so much for being here today and talking about these water issues. And thank you, Mr. Oseguera, for the wonderful film. And for Joe and Patrick, thank you so much.
Thank
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you, Aaron.
Okay, thank you, Aaron. Thank you,
Have a good
Vicky.
day, guys. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Okay, bye.